How are we looking?
Yo YouTube, what is going on? Jake Felzine here, back with another video, guys, and today we are talking about the number one thing that I think the highly anticipated Panasonic GH6 is gonna need. Let's get on into it. Yo guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. We just like to talk cameras, talk a lot about Micro Four Thirds cameras. I'm a big Micro Four Thirds shooter, and if you didn't watch it recently, I made a video talking about, is Micro Four Thirds dead? A lot of you reached out to me in the comments and said, Jake, there's actually been some confirmed interviews and some discussion and rumors that the GH6 is definitely happening. So I thought today we would discuss, first of all, yay, I'm super excited. In the last video, I really just talked about the supply and demand of Micro Four Thirds. Is there enough demand for the small sensor mount to compete with Sony and Canon, who really are pushing APS-C and full frame sensors? That was that whole video, and I was really just crossing my fingers going, I hope there's enough of us out there that Panasonic, executives basically can say, yes, we can justify this GH6. And so guys, apparently that is happening, which I am super psyched on. I will say that I am curious because, again, like I said in the last video, is this the last model? Time will only tell. But today I wanted to talk about the number one thing, and you guys probably know what I'm going to say in this video, and really it's just another voice, if anything. Panasonic, if you're listening, I've been using your cameras for forever. I love them. They're some of the best cameras on the market. I'm sure you've heard this before, but again, in hopeful of the consumer and democracy here, I want to speak up and talk today about the number one thing that I think you could fix. And I think you could be like the best camera manufacturer in the game. Now, no surprise, you guys probably saw this coming, but it's autofocus. If Panasonic could fix their autofocus, I honestly think they are candidates for some of the best cameras ever. And the funny thing is, even with crappy autofocus, they already are. We all know it, the GH5 has got to be one of the most highly sold cameras of all time. I mean, it's just an absolute beast of a camera. The GH4 was wildly popular. Panasonic makes great cameras. But again, where I feel they really lack is in that autofocus department. Now, maybe I should be a little bit more clear in what I'm saying there. I'm talking about their video continuous autofocus. We've all been tricked by the marketing. For example, the new S5 just came out, their full frame sort of GH5 small body camera. Super exciting looking camera, and they, like they've done every new release, said, oh, the autofocus is so much better, and we're all holding our breath going, no way, did they do it? Is it phase detect? Is it a better system for video? And the unfortunate reality is they just improved on their depth from defocus contrast-based system. Now, don't get me wrong, and I will preach to high heavens. I'm a G9, GH5S shooter. I had the G7. Contrast-based detection works great for photos. There's really no denying that. I mean, personally, even shooting some, outdoor sports and mountain biking and snowmobiling with the G9, I find that the photography autofocus is totally on par with the competition. Maybe not quite as good with certain moving subjects, but in general, I'm getting a ton of very sharp frames, and I'm never sitting there going like, oh man, this is so bad. They've got to fix this. It sucks. But when it comes to video, that is where depth from defocus contrast base really just falls apart. And I think that no matter how much they improve the system, and they really have, like the G9's firmware updates, the GH5S's firmware updates, even the S5, the new firmware for that focusing system, it is getting a lot better in video. That is for sure. There's a lot less wobble. There's a lot less hunting. It's making smarter decisions on what to keep in focus. But the reality is that they're only improving a system that by design is doing the very thing that we strongly dislike as videographers. The number one complaint that I always see, and I say it myself, is that hunting in the background, that wobble of the out of focus and in focus areas. And that's how depth from defocus works. For those of you who don't know, it's simply going too far out of focus, too short out of focus, knowing that then between those 2 points, essentially kind of averaging the law of averages and where the contrast was the sharpest, it can then snag the perfect focus. And like I keep saying, for photos, this system works flawlessly. Even on a lot of moving subjects, that wobble is distracting, that's for sure, but also it really nails focus a lot of the time. A couple weekends back, my dog was playing with my in-laws' dog, and I was just out there having fun, blasting continuous autofocus with the G9, and I couldn't believe how many frames I was getting in focus with how fast they were running around. The reality is, again, like I keep saying, photography, depth from defocus works great. But when it comes to video, that system of going in and out to get that perfect focus, no matter how much it's been tuned, no matter how smart it can be with AI and, image recognition under the hood, the fact is that it's still always going to do that behavior that we hate. So that was probably really long-winded, and I don't want this video to drag out, but like me and many other Panasonic video users who share the same feelings, if Panasonic could make their autofocus be anywhere close to Sony or Canon or Olympus or Fuji, I honestly think that they would have the best cameras in the world. Now, to go along with that claim, let's just kind of discuss some of the other features that they knock out of the park. They've been knocking out of the park, and they continue to knock out of the park, but I think so many users still use Canon and Sony because we're run and gun shooters, and autofocus is just so nice. Panasonic has always had phenomenal menus. They are complicated, but that's because they're feature rich, and I will say that of all the camera systems I've owned, even though they are a little bit more complicated than maybe Blackmagic, Panasonic's menus have always been my favorite. If I'm looking for something, it's usually in the way the menu system works. It's usually next to things that I would think that it would be next to. It just makes a lot of sense. Also, in the GH5S and G9, you've got touch screen, fully articulating screen. You can scroll through the menu options, select the menu options. You can click on the screen for focusing. You can click on the screen for custom functions. They really have almost no limitation with their touchscreen interfaces. They're snappy, they work great, and they're phenomenal to use. Menus, screens, the other thing that I love is just the user interface firmware combination. Panasonic cameras, in my experience, never feel laggy. I know my Sony is an old camera, but so is my Panasonic G9, and even my GH5S is starting to kind of get into that slightly old camera life cycle phase. Both of those cameras are so much snappier than my A7 III, and I don't know if I've got like a bad unit, but I've noticed that as far as like camera controls, button controls, menu controls, there's noticeable lag when using the A7 III, which is, sorry, that's what we're filming on today for that awesome video autofocus. The A7 III is just laggy, whereas the Panasonics aren't. Let's hit the most debatable and controversial subject, color science. I am probably really biased because I have so much practice with Panasonic colors, but I think the image coming out of Panasonic is phenomenal. Again, I don't like to get into this too much because anyone can do anything with any of these cameras. Sony can look like Panasonic, Panasonic can look like Sony, all of them can look like Canon. But the fact of the matter is I personally have just found that the log profiles from Panasonic, as well as their baked-in profiles, just look good. Now, you may totally disagree with that one, but I will say Aiden Robbins, who's one of my favorite YouTubers. If you guys haven't watched him, go check him out. I'll link him down below. If for some reason you haven't heard of him, go watch his stuff. He's phenomenal. He recently made a video with the new S5, which is a full-frame camera, but he talked about how much time he saved in post with his color grading because he was so pleased with Panasonic colors. And I gotta say, he comes from using the EOS R, which is every YouTuber's dream camera, and they all rave about how good the color science is coming out of the R. And he said that his color grading workflow was faster, and he just thought the S5's colors looked great. And if you haven't watched his short film that he did with the S5, The Photos Are Memories, I think is what it's called, that video is phenomenal, and honestly, it's one of the most beautiful, YouTuber like short films I think I maybe have ever seen. Panasonic's colors, from me and from other big YouTubers, agree that they're really good. Oh, and I almost forgot the one that like they've always been the reigning champion on forever and people are trying to catch up is IBIS. And this one again is a very hard one to quantify. If you've never used a GH5 or a G9 with or without a stabilized lens, you will be blown away at what is possible. Panasonic has just completely dialed and nailed the IBIS game, in-body image stabilization, for those who don't know, which means that when you're running around with the camera, it just really typically almost, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to hype it too much because I've used it for a while and I don't want to be like a total fanboy here, again, which is hilarious because we're shooting on a Sony today. But like the G9, I mean, you don't need to bring a gimbal. Depending on what kind of shots you're doing, you almost do not need a gimbal. Not saying you can't just like flail it around like crazy, but if you're being intentional with your shots and your movements, like it looks like it's flying on a gimbal. Like, I'm not kidding. Again, it's hard to quantify. It's just incredible. Okay, so there's IBIS as well. One more huge one. And I mean, I could probably go on for hours on all the things I like about Panasonic cameras, but the other huge one is the value to cost ratio. Panasonic is notorious for including incredible specs in their cameras at a very good price. The GH5S and the G9. G9 is under $1,000 right now for just the body. Both of them can shoot 10-bit video. If that doesn't like rock your world, then I don't know what will, guys. I mean, they're incredible cameras and they always have really fair price for the specs that they offer. So even if you hate Panasonic color science, you have 10-bit files to work with. And again, you know, Sony and Canon, they're trying to get in the game with 10-bit now as well, but Panasonic's been giving this to us for a while. They've got it dialed. Okay, Jake, wrap it up. Let's end this video. People get the point. You love Panasonic cameras. We've talked about the screens, the menus, the color science, the codecs, you know, the IBIS, all the things that I love. And it's just so funny to me because I really think that most people overlook Panasonic because their autofocus, frankly, in video just kind of sucks. So Panasonic, if you're watching, I hope the GH6 has a different autofocus system. I think that you could have the best selling camera like ever if you just had a good autofocus system in the GH6. Sensor size certainly is important. I think a lot of people care about it, but at the end of the day, given all of the features that are in the GH5 and the S5, if you just put good autofocus in the GH6 and your full frame cameras moving forward, I don't know. I think you'd have a lot of people switching to Panasonic. So with that being said, guys, again, I will wrap it up right there. Hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you did, be sure to leave it a like, comment down below. Let's chat. I love talking about cameras. I love making videos like this, working on a couple of other little silent short films as well, which is kind of what I've been doing on the channel recently. But yeah, guys, super excited. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.